Glad to see you. Great to have you checking in with Leading Edge once again. I'm Jeff Smith. Ever since the pandemic, there have been numerous studies about COVID and mental health, the impact on adults, the impact on children, the impact on the economy. But the trouble is, you will find if you read up on it, the problems with mental health that are getting a lot of talk today preceded COVID and should have been talked about years ago. According to the CDC, many people from racial and ethnic minority groups face obstacles in accessing needed care. Take a look at this graphic. These obstacles may include lack of or insufficient health insurance, lack of racial and ethnic diversity among mental health care providers, lack of culturally competent providers, financial strain, and the stigma that goes along with it. I wanted to bring on Diana Patton, who's joining us here today. She has got a summit coming up that we're going to talk about in our second segment. But Diana, as we have talked about, you and I have had phone conversations over the last couple of weeks and months looking at the things. We've talked a lot about mental health. And you said, Jeff, we really need to have a conversation about how mental health is affecting our minority communities. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Why is it such an issue? Well, why is it something that hasn't been talked about enough yet?
Well, I don't know that it's really everyone else's issue, but it is our issue in terms of the fact that we, as a race, have learned culturally not to talk about it. You have to see, you have to understand
Which goes back
history.
Decades.
Yes. We need an hour and a half to talk about our historical relevance in the healthcare system, which has not been advantageous to us as Black people and people of color, right? You list it. So there's a stigma that's associated with that, specifically as it deals with, are people really, can I trust this healthcare system, right? And so there are institutions that recognize the stigma. And so we have to do things differently when we're going to make certain that people have the care that they need. Now that's just on physical care. Let's talk about mental care. Mental care is something that we as a society have just recently begun to embrace, but from a specific, let's talk about the African American, the Black community. We've not talked about that because there are certain stigmas within our own culture that say we don't need to talk about that.
One of the things that you bring to the table again and again, when you talk to groups, when you present, when you're on a podcast, you turn the focus on yourself. You talk about the moments that there have been times when you said, I needed help. I did not seek help.
And I did not know how to. Now you're talking about, I have a law degree, I'm a licensed attorney, right? And I have had significant amount of experience in the business world, but no one told me
you would present and somebody would think,
what
this
do you
is
got
somebody
a problem?
who is mentally
how are you,
strong.
Right, how are you have a problem? You speak well, you have lots of experiences, you have done a lot in the community, but no one, and I mean no one, said, Diana, it's okay not to be okay. I understand that you were taught not to talk about your mental illness. But by the way, here are the signs when you need to reach out for help.
Was that your community growing up?
That was my community growing up. You have to understand, I went to church Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we were taught, you pray it away. We were taught what goes on in this house stays in this house. We were taught we had to secure our opportunities by not talking about weakness. I didn't know that by talking about your mental health, I understood that to be a weakness. I'm also as a corporate executive, I'm a Black woman who's trying to establish myself in the. I'm not going to talk about my mental health. Are you kidding me? Then what's that going to do for my opportunities? Oh, by the way, I'm at the top of my game in this executive position. If I talk about my mental health, what am I saying about other Black people? You see?
Right. Was COVID the breakthrough for these conversations?
Absolutely. It was the tipping point. We saw more people talking about their mental health. We had nothing to do. Loneliness, as our Surgeon General just recently reported in May, is the epidemic of today. You combine loneliness with the already stigma, with the issues that a lot of Black people have had to deal with over the years. That could be another whole session. And you have an epidemic. And so what do we need to do? This needs to be an ongoing segment. I've talked to you about that. We need to talk more about it. We need to have people talking about symptoms, issues, problems, things that I see. some of the narratives that we have to shift within our own organizations, within our schools, within the healthcare system, within the corporate world, right? So that we get permission somewhat to be able to say it's okay, and that also I will not be discriminated against and or overlooked because I speak up about this.
What is it going to take, though? And coming up in our next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about one of the points that the CDC brought up was just the reflection of yourself in the care providers that you are seeking and whether or not those people are out there. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was how do we go about, I guess, getting that comfortable feeling for those to open up and to realize that this is not a sign of weakness.
Right. So I think
I think it still is in our DNA to
with
think
everyone.
it is, right?
I don't care what color you are. I think it's with everyone. We have to really make it more normal to talk about it. Right? And this goes into every sector of work and or community, and especially churches, but especially people, which is in everyday conversations, right? This is what I've experienced. This is something that is causing me a problem. But then, because also taking it out of what's considered to be your stereotypical, oh, I have schizophrenia, or these are very serious mental illness issues, but there could be just general issues of depression and anxiety, and just knowing what they are.
Do you think the corporate world is ready, or even small businesses, it doesn't have to be major corporations, is ready to embrace the fact that they need to be more understanding, more empathetic?
They need, it's beyond they need to be ready. They have more jobs for people that people are not willing to go into. That's a sign that people are not willing to go through the standard corporate environment. Right? People are being burnt out. People want to have hybrid environments. It's not that you don't want to. It's that you better do it.
We did a series of stories about healthcare over the last couple of weeks here at WTOL 11, and one of the things that came out of talking with an industry analyst out of the Wharton School of Business at University of Pennsylvania, he said the real epidemic going forward is not wanting to work.
Correct.
So, and that goes across the board. Stay with us. We've got much more to come on this edition of Leading Edge. In fact, we're going to kind of dive into what we said was finding those caretakers and caregivers who reflect more of the minority community when they're seeking help. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are talking about the stigmas and kind of the barriers that exist for minority groups in seeking health when it comes to mental health. And we want to welcome in Sonya Quinn, who is now joining us from NAMI here. She's a community outreach organizer. We appreciate you spending some time with us as well. As we were talking to Diana, you want to see a doctor that looks like you, that sounds like you, that has gone through the same things you have gone through.
Absolutely.
Even a therapist at this point. We're not talking just, you know, I've got a boo-boo on my knee, fix that, doc. We're talking about somebody who can get in here. Why is there such a lack of those people available to the minority community? What do you see?
I think what we need to start doing, Jeff, is making sure that we are promoting social work to our African American community, because they never go into that. There's not a lot of money into social work, but it's a passion. So if we can start telling...
It's a calling.
It's a calling, absolutely, and you have to be passionate about it, and we need to start educating our community on social work and the importance of going into an agency and seeing someone that looks like us. It's very important.
Therapy specifically, let's talk about that as well, and being able to have somebody just converse, just allow you to open up. That's not there either, according to statistics.
I think what we see a lot of, especially with NAMI, people calling in, they want to talk to someone that they understand their culture. Understand the things that we've gone through as African Americans is really important, and a lot of times that makes a difference for an individual.
I reached out to a number of our healthcare organizations here locally, and I did want to share with our audience and with you both the response we got back from Greg at ProMedica. And if we could show that, Gregory Braylock, he said ProMedica is taking a more deliberate action to close some of these gaps, establishing a partnership with TPS on the Pre-Medical and Health Sciences Academy, making our workplace more inclusive for all employees and more attractive for people of color, working with the UT College of Medicine and Life Sciences, which is recruiting greater numbers of underrepresented minority students into medical school, providing staff education to help improve our effectiveness in building trust and safety with our patients, and evaluating our clinical data to take action on improving health disparities that might exist within specific populations. Diana and I, before you got here, we talked about the breakthrough that COVID might have been. Are you seeing that?
Yes, and that's a good question. Actually, since we've come back from the pandemic, we've been very busy. The most positive thing that I think that came out of COVID is people are more aware of their mental health. They're more aware of the struggles that they had, the anxiety, the depression, the isolation from loved ones and friends and family. So we've seen a huge increase in call volume.
Let me ask you, because we know and we appreciate viewers all ages that spend some time with us each and every week, but this knows no age limits as far as what we're talking here.
Absolutely.
We've got issues with youth. All communities do. But do you see it specifically? Are those calls coming in from parents talking about their kids? Are those calls coming from kids?
They're from the parents. A lot of parents are calling in looking for resources for their children. Like I said a few minutes ago, the isolation is still upon the children. A lot of kids, we didn't think about it during the pandemic, but they were in the house 24 hours a day. You know, they didn't have the...
Tell me about it.
I know. They weren't able to go outside to play with their friends. They weren't able to go to lunch or on the playground. So we have a lot of calls coming in from parents looking for resources for their children, for their mental health.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that in our next segment. But as we go to our final few minutes here with you, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the All Rise Summit, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. But tell people a little bit about that event. And this is a passion, right? I find people with passion and bring them on this show. But this is one of those things. This is a go moment for you.
For sure. Where we are, All Rise Live Global Summit, All Rise. I'm a former civil rights attorney. We all rise. We rise up to the justice system, to our work, to everything. We're not rising up in ourselves and understanding everything that she's talking about. Like, we need to learn as women how to speak our visions to power from a space of healing. We never talk about healing and these opportunities to know our potential and our calling from the workspace. Yeah. Right?
But what are the shortcomings? I mean, from where do those come?
You mean the lack of?
Yeah, the lack of understanding, the lack of reacting. Well, because
who talked to you about your calling? Who talked to you about your triggers? Who talked to you about your mental wellness? Who talked to you about all those factors that play a role in your ability to have success? No one talked to me about that, ever. What did I do? I sought it out. Right? And I went to conferences. My first was the Tony Robbins conference in 1999, right? And he was considered this odd guy, but everything he said then is true. Why am I bringing this to Toledo? Because we need to hear it. We need to know that we have a job as women leaders to do things differently. Women leaders are leaving organizations faster than they ever left them before. What did it have a lot to do with? COVID. Right? And we need to look at work differently. We need to develop different pipelines and way we do work. We need to, as women, speak up in these organizations. NAMI is a huge part of what we're doing because we need to talk about mental wellness in this space. And
I'm sure that will come up once again, this event coming up on July 15th.
June 15th.
June, I'm sorry. I'm pushing it down the calendar. June 15th through the 17th at the Hilton Garden Inn, Glass City Center.
AllRiseLive.com.
Yeah, and that is where you find more information. But you knew I was setting it up on the tee. You hit it out of the park. Sonya and Diana, thank you so much for spending some time. Stay right there. We're going to talk about the Boys and Girls Club of Toledo right after this. Welcome back here on Leading Edge. Once again, appreciate you spending some time with us. Jim Rivas from Toledo Boys and Girls Club joining us here today. And Jim, I'm so happy you are here because for a number of reasons. One, because of the work that's being done, but you got a chance to listen to what we were talking about there, mental health, making sure that those who can't find the help they need, find something that reflects their needs. And I'm sure this was echoing in your head, things you deal with each and every day.
Yeah, Jeff, it absolutely is. One of the things that's really stood out to us at the Boys and Girls Club is that since the pandemic, we've identified that roughly 50% of all our youth between the ages of kindergarten through senior year in high school are suffering some kind of mental anguish. We've also identified that 40% of that number has had suicidal ideations and another 50% of that number has attempted suicide. And this is regardless.
And this is all through screening the kids?
This is through screening the kids nationally. And so when we apply that statistic here to Toledo, it's within plus or minus 1 or 2% of that national number. We apply to Topeka, we apply to Los Angeles, it doesn't matter. That number is pretty consistent across the board. You know, the kids, it's really fascinating because before the pandemic, it was usually 1 in 5 children were suffering some kind of mental anguish. Post-pandemic, 50%. Man. It really played a hard impact on our children being isolated.
There have been so many conversations, and obviously we've done it here. We've talked about the pitfalls that the youth have fallen into, not only nationally, but obviously here in our region, the violence, the uptick in violence. And you and I were having a conversation before we came out here today, and we're looking to outside organizations to try to fix our ills here in Toledo, as opposed to really focusing. And I told you, I was talking with Toledo City Councilman John Hobbs earlier this week, and he said, the boots are already on the ground. The organizations are already doing the work. Places like yourself that maybe aren't getting the financial backing, and those are dollars that could help, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are wonderful resources that are already here. One is actually just retiring, Brian Bird from the city of Toledo.
In September.
In September. But I will tell you that the key is, in talking to Johnny Hobbs, talking to other city council members, Venice Williams and others, is the after-school programming. When kids leave school at the end of the day, it's what are they going to do to occupy that time? You know, some kids play sports and extracurricular activities, but when they have a place to go and they can develop themselves as a person to caring, responsible individuals, then that removes that temptation from the street, the temptation to try a drug, to temptation to participate in gang violence. Yes, right. Exactly.
And so, as you reach out to these youth, what is the response? I mean, we talked about we talked with Diana and Sonya about kind of hitting the glass ceiling and breaking through that breakthrough moment. I mean, how do you find it?
Well, I think that it happens a couple different ways. The first is, number one, kids typically are seeking us out because they want a sense of belonging. And we found that an interesting story. When we reopened our clubs after the pandemic, I had this young girl come in that was roughly 2nd grade. She came off a yellow bus, walked into the clubs. She dropped her backpack and said, "I'm finally home." Oh. And so kids, you know, have a sense that when they come to the clubs, they know what they're going to get. There's good quality people, good quality program, number one.
But that ends at 7:30, right?
That ends at 7:30 p.m. Okay, but the good news is that from 3:30 to 7:30, they're getting help with their homework. They're learning how to cope. They're learning how to engage and with their peer group. We're working with organizations such as Connecting Kids to Meals, so they get a good meal. And at the end of the day, they're going home, and they are ready to be home because they've accomplished all their goals. Homework's done, meal's been fed. They're ready for the next day. But to your point, as far as that, you know, the community coming together, it truly does take a village to make this happen. Yeah. And we have resources with the YWCA, First Tee of Lake Erie, YMCA, Connecting Kids to Meals. We're there, and it's a collaboration effort. If we come together as a community, we can help tackle some of these problems.
Do you think, and we always ask the question, and it's a hard one to answer, is what you're doing working?
Absolutely. In fact, the recent statistic from our latest Boys and Girls Club annual meeting was that 94% of the kids that have been going to the Boys and Girls Clubs post-pandemic are seeing their way through the last 2 years, going through graduation. They're risk averse as far as being tempted to join a gang, to attempt smoking or try alcohol. And that 94% number, so think about that, 100 kids that are at risk, youth, 94 out of those 100 are finding an alternative way to a more positive lifestyle. And it's wonderful.
John was also a big proponent of summer programming. I mean, how important, how effective has that been? Have you guys seen that?
That's our greatest uptick with the Boys and Girls Clubs. That's actually going to be starting in 2 weeks here in Toledo. And we run that program from noon until 5 p.m. Monday through Friday at each of our clubs. And I'll tell you, Jeff, it's wonderful because these kids are coming back. They're learning to swim. They're learning to participate with the metro parks and outdoor activities such as kayaking, gardening, things of that nature, but they're learning new skills. And the thing is that it's a different challenge every day. And in the summer programming, less on homework, but more on enrichment of here's what the rest of the world has to offer them.
Yeah. How do you get the word out to get them? Because obviously those who are there are those who are, we talk about it in politics all the time, they're civically inclined, right? But you plant the seed, does it germinate outside and bring the others from the community in?
Well, I'll tell you, the biggest voice for us to get kids to participate are the partnerships with Toledo Public Schools, Washington local schools, the private schools, that they recognize the benefits of what the Boys and Girls Clubs bring to the table. And so they now become a natural broadcaster to bring these kids in.
Walking billboard for it, right?
And so, but the other piece is that with our teens are our fastest growing population. And right now when the teens start coming in and they enjoy the experience, they start talking to their peers. And so we went from 87 teens immediately after the pandemic to 495 teens that are being served on a daily basis here in Toledo. That's 495 more kids that are not at risk.
It's gut-wrenching. We've got about 30 seconds. It's gut-wrenching with each tragedy in the streets, but I hear hope in your voice and what you're saying, and you probably you have to bring it to the table every day.
Absolutely. You don't go to the world with rosy-colored glasses, but you have to look at it and say that there is hope out there, and you look out to the communities that we serve, and you recognize that at some point there is somebody out there that's going to have that cure for cancer or first person to walk on Mars, and they very well could be in our neighborhood. How do we reach them?
Yeah, Jim, thank you so much for spending some
Absolutely.
time. A great conversation, and we'll wrap things up for this segment of Leading Edge right after this. Well, for a final time, I just want to say a big thank you to our audience out there for spending some time with us each and every week. A reminder, Leading Edge is a podcast as well. You can check it out wherever you download your podcast, and you can see any part you missed on our YouTube page. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.